Chapter 10 is called Dealing with Mr. Torrance. Trevor and David walked up the farm track together in the light drizzle. They watched Mr. Jessup driving the quad bike around the grassy field, scattering what appeared to be seeds from a bag as he went. I thought the soil had to be turned before farmers planted things, said David as he watched the farmer at work. He's not planting anything. It's the wrong time of year for that, Trevor replied. That's pest control pellets he's throwing. Although usually it would make sense to do that in a field with crops in it, not one that's fallow. What's fallow? It just means it's not being used for anything just now. The soil is being rested. Both boys had left from David's house that afternoon. With his dad at work down at the supermarket and his mum needing to go to the post office with her orders, David and Trevor would be left to their own devices. They made some chocolate spread sandwiches and decided to walk to the meeting despite the rain. Little did they realise that Becky had been waiting in the corner of the street, ready to follow the boys to wherever they were going. She was good at keeping her distance, always making sure that she kept at least 2 lampposts between them as she kept up her pursuit. As the boys followed the road heading out of town and towards the countryside, she extended her distance, able to watch them from further away to see where they were heading. David was the one who entered the code when they reached the headquarters. Kazima told him it after he'd proved his commitment during the last mission. When they entered, the boys found that they were the first ones there. David looked at the photographs on the walls. Miss Fleck's photo had now had a red cross through it and had joined the others on the right-hand side of the map, leaving Mr. Torrance's photo on the left side on its own. Tell me about some of your older missions, David asked Trevor. I can't make out any of their faces. That one at the very bottom, Trevor said, pointing at a photo of an elderly lady drinking tea in a cafe. That's Mrs. Smith. She was our Lollipop Lady, back in primary school. Ark was just me and Chris in those days. It was before Kazima had moved here. Anyway, this Lollipop Lady was the reason we started Ark. She was just so mean to Chris. She had this bag of sweeties, you see, and she used to always hand them out to children who said thank you after she'd helped them cross the road. Well, as you know, Chris is one of the most polite people you'd ever meet. He thanked her every single time. But did he get any sweets? No, he didn't. She would hand them out to everyone else, but when it came to Chris, she'd look him up and down and say, "You've had enough sweets already." That's awful, David said. It must have really upset him. Well, you know Chris, he would never let it show. Anyway, we wanted to find a way to let her know what it felt like to be left out like that. So, on one cold October morning, we decided to make up a few big flasks of hot tea. We set up shop on the other side of the road from Mrs. Smith and started handing out cups of brew to the mums and dads doing the school run. Did we offer a cup to her? Of course not. As I said, we wanted her to know what it felt like to be left out. Maybe not the most effective solution, I'm sure you'll agree, but you need to remember, these were the days before Kazima. We didn't have the same creativity. Hey, I've just realised who that photo at the top is, said David. That's the church minister, Reverend Peters, right? Yeah, it is, said Trevor, suddenly looking quite ashamed. This was the first mission we did with Kazima. It seemed important at the time, but we all kind of regret it now. You see, every Tuesday night, the Reverend used to put on this youth group. It was good. There was a pool table, Xbox, not religious stuff like you'd expect. Anyway, it was something for us to do. We all used to really look forward to going. There was one week, though, that none of us could make it. We went along the following week. The place was all locked up with a note saying youth group cancelled indefinitely. We were gutted. Kazima had this idea of letting the Reverend know how important it had been for all of us. So she went to work making this huge 5-metre banner which read, "No church today. Sorry." We got up super early on the Sunday morning and attached it to the hedge outside the graveyard. It took ages for the Reverend to realise what had been going on. His service was due to start and his congregation still hadn't arrived. He eventually found the sign with only a couple of minutes to spare, but by that time it was too late. He ended up preaching to only a handful of people that day. We found out a few weeks later, though, that Becky and her mates had turned up at youth group the week we'd missed and completely trashed the place. They did that Diet Coke and mints trick. You know, the one that makes it explode everywhere. The game's console was irreparable. Pool table ruined. How could the Reverend have opened up the youth group when there was nothing for us to do? You know, as far as I see it, Becky has as much to answer for as Mr. Torrance, Miss Fleck, any of them, David said. I think it's about time we found a way of getting back at her. Trevor sighed. I agree with you on that one, David, he said, but Kazima would never let it happen. That's not what ARC is for, she'd say. Believe me, we've fought her on this many times before, but it always comes back to the same thing, the grown-ups. If we can put a stop to Becky herself being treated unfairly, then maybe she'll start being a bit more kind to the rest of us. Why is it always Kazima that calls the shots, though? Said David. You said it yourself. ARC was started by you and Chris. Who made her boss? Kazima's been through a lot, you know. Her and her mum have moved from town to town chasing work. She carries so much pain. Pain about the way she's been treated in the past. Pain about losing her dad so young. She has a passion for ARC that none of the rest of us can come close to. She has a vision. As if on cue, the boys heard fumbling at the door, and Kazima entered, joining them at the desk. Mr. Torrance has gone too far, she announced, putting pleasantries to the side and getting straight onto business. We need to make him publicly humiliated, and I'm not just talking about in front of our English class. Trevor, did you manage to get a hold of those plans from your dad's office? Yes, these are the photocopies I made from the press release. Trevor took 3 pieces of paper out of his backpack. Good, said Kazima, as she glanced over the pages. Elmswood is going to be the centre of national attention next week. The place will be buzzing. You'll all know that this year's town fair will be coinciding with the opening of our new library, and Alfred Thorpe will be in attendance. Where the Prime Minister goes, the national press follows. Kazima held up one of the pages on which a map had been drawn of the new library alongside a large marquee area which was to be constructed on the neighbouring park. Whilst holding the map, Kazima began to read an extract from the press release. Ahead of the official opening of the new town library, the Prime Minister shall be the lead judge in the fair's baking competition, alongside Miss Edna Fleck from the Fleck Bakery. Before she read the next part, a rare smile crept across Kazima's lips. And here we have in the list of entrants for this year's baking competition a certain Mr. Derek Torrance. Perhaps our dear teacher would appreciate a hand with his baking, and maybe even a few extra ingredients. And that is the end of chapter 10. And I'll be back in a moment with chapter 11. See you soon. Bye.